And in exchange, they said you have to do another Q&A. So here I am, and it's the last Q&A, so we're going to go for 45 minutes. And listen, the thing is, I say, and it's completely true, my mission is evangelical. And I'm an evangelist of monsters. And I believe that the parables that you can learn through fantasy and horror as instruments of illuminating, not, everybody thinks about horror being just a thing that shocks and horrifies, and I actually think there's a huge, incredibly graceful part of the human spirit to be discovered through the fables that I try to do. The Shape of Water, Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, this, Hellboy even, and every time I tackle it, I try to illuminate a little bit of the human spirit.
Well, I think you find things in the darkness that you lose.
Yeah. My acupuncturist said something the other day that made sense. He said some people, if they experience something terrible in childhood, they detach from Earth and they have a clear communication with parables in heaven. This is my acupuncturist, so I don't argue with him. And he said, and then in order to root themselves, they look for the shadow of the mountain, the yang. And you can do it through grounding or love or earth, or simply the darker side of things. Since he had 20 needles in me, I didn't argue at all. But there is something, this is my religion, in a way. I was raised Catholic, as you may have noticed from the movie, but I lapsed, and I tried to form my own phraseology of the spiritual through the Zen, through Tao, through Eastern philosophies, through even aesthetics like wabi-sabi, kintsugi, an amalgam of things that are all in my movies. I try to talk about things that, I don't think there's wisdom in art, but there is experience. And I think you can, if you presume that you're wise, you're a fool. But if you presume that you're experienced, you are noting the time. At 61, I've gone through most of the bad conversations you have to have in life. And you want to share them with, as a son, as a father, as a brother, as a friend, as a human being.
You mentioned being on an evangelical mission, and that brings up something I wanted to talk about here with you in front of these folks. But I got to visit the set of Frankenstein almost a year and a half ago in Toronto, and spent 3 wonderful days watching this man work.
On the autopsy scene?
It was the assembly scene of the monster.
We saw the knee in front of you.
Yes, yes. And they had he and Oscar had these great nicknames for all of the little props. One of the guys was called Canadian Bacon because of the flayed skin, and all of these off-color.
Yorick.
Yes, Yorick was the skull.
Yeah.
But one of the things you said in our conversation, I keep thinking about it now because I think it's stuck with me. You said, you only get so much time. I'm paraphrasing here. You said you only get so much time on this earth. And I used to think about making movies as like building cathedrals. But sometimes now I think it's more like building 7-Elevens.
Yes. I think there is, when people worry about the size of the screen, I worry about the size of the ideas. That's what makes cinema. Not if you have to hire a babysitter and buy popcorn. It's the size of the idea, the size of the emotion, and the risks you take. That is cinema, and it would be completely hypocritical for me to say the only way. I experienced most of the classics on Channel 6 in my hometown. So how can I say, well, the only way is it the greatest way? 100%. Collective cinema, 100%. But I do fight very much for one thing. If my movies become or not a moment in time, that I cannot control. But the people that are touched by the movies are touched at a molecular level. They are affected by them, and they know I am sincere. And sincerity is important, but to be absolutely exposed emotionally and not be afraid of that. We live in a time where emotion is almost something you're ashamed of. Irony has replaced intelligence. People can take a negative position. We are in a moment where the polarities are both fear. It's an incredible moment in humanity right now. We are this close to losing essentially what makes us human, and whatever is standing, if we don't fight for love, and I know this sounds really disingenuous, and grace, even in the worst circumstances, I'm not saying we're perfect. We should be imperfect. I'm fucked up. But we can be graceful and loving in doing that. If we don't fight for that, whatever's standing at the end of the day, even if it looks like a human, it will not be human. And I think it's very important to remember that. It's the same thing that was happening in 1818 when Mary Shelley wrote the novel. It was at the peak of the Industrial Revolution, beginning of the humanization. We have things that can do what you do faster. And it didn't get us into any better positions. And it was the moment where the entire structure was suffocating the voice of females. There was not a place for women in society. We haven't fared any better. It was a moment in which it was all Eurocentric and Western. We haven't fared any better. Success started to be measured by exclusively money. We haven't fared any better. So these are things, that's why the novel is immortal, because we are moronic. We don't learn the lesson.
And